A father's wake-up call. Billionaire CEO Nathaniel Carter was at the pinnacle of success. But when his 6-year-old son crashes a live press conference with a heartbreaking plea, his entire world shifts. Can a man who built an empire learn? That true wealth is measured in love, not dollars. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Nathaniel Carter's penthouse office. At 45, he was at the height of his power as CEO of Carter Enterprises. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly styled, and his custom-tailored suit showed off his still athletic build. The view of the New York skyline reminded him daily of all he'd conquered. Mr. Carter, the board members are waiting in the conference room. His assistant, Vivian, announced from the doorway. Nathaniel glanced at his watch, a $50,000 piece his wife had given him for their 10th anniversary 3 years ago. Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes. As Vivian left, Nathaniel's phone buzzed. It was a text from his wife, Diana. Max's school recital is at 5 today. He has a solo. Please try to make it this time. Nathaniel sighed and put the phone face down on his desk. He had 3 meetings, a conference call with Tokyo, and the final preparations for tomorrow's merger announcement. He typed a quick reply. I'll try my best. In the conference room, 12 board members waited with anxious expressions. The Carter-Yamamoto merger was the biggest deal in the company's history, a $4.2 billion acquisition that would make them the industry leader. Let's get started, Nathaniel said firmly as he took his seat at the head of the table. Where are we with the final paperwork? James Wilson, his chief financial officer and oldest friend, slid a folder across the table. Everything's ready. For the announcement tomorrow. The press conference is scheduled for 10 a.m. Good. And the Yamamoto team? They arrive tonight. Dinner reservations at Le Cirque at 8. Nathaniel nodded, flipping through the papers. Perfect. For the next 2 hours, they went through every detail of the merger. By the time they finished, it was already 4:30 p.m. One more thing, James said as the meeting wrapped up. Have you told Max about the Tokyo trip next month? It's right around his birthday. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Not yet. Diana will understand. This merger means security for Max's future. James gave him a look they'd shared since college. Nate, you said the same thing about the Dubai deal last year, and the Singapore expansion before that. I don't need a lecture on fatherhood, James. I know what I'm doing. James raised his hands in surrender. Just saying they grow up fast. Michelle and I missed Katie's first steps because of that London conference. Still regret it. Nathaniel checked his phone. 3 missed calls from Diana and a text that read, Max keeps asking if you're coming. What should I tell him? He glanced at his watch. 4:45. The recital started in 15 minutes at a school 20 minutes away. Even if he left now, his other phone rang. The secure line only 5 people had the number to. It was Hiroshi Yamamoto himself. Nathaniel answered immediately. Hiroshi, good to hear from you. Carter-san, I apologize for the late notice, but our flight has been moved up. We will be landing in 1 hour. Is it possible to move our dinner earlier? Nathaniel hesitated for only a second. Of course, I'll have everything arranged. As he hung up, Vivian appeared at the door again. Sir, Mrs. Carter is on line 1. She says it's urgent. Nathaniel picked up the office phone. Diana, I was just about to call you. Let me guess. Diana's voice was tight. You're not coming. The Yamamoto team's schedule changed. They're arriving early. I have to meet them for dinner. It's 15 minutes, Nathaniel. 15 minutes to watch your son perform his first solo. This merger is worth billions, Diana. It's the deal of a lifetime. There was a long pause. When Diana spoke again, her voice was dangerously calm. You know what, Nathaniel? Don't bother. Max already knows you're not coming. He stopped asking. The line went dead. Nathaniel stared at the phone for a moment, then set it down. He had a dinner to prepare for. At the Carter family's luxurious brownstone, Diana Carter finished helping 6-year-old Max with his bow tie. His sandy brown hair, just like his father's had been before the gray, was neatly combed. Do I look good, Mommy? Max asked, turning from side to side. Diana smiled, though her eyes were sad. You look perfect, sweetheart. Is Daddy really not coming? Max's big brown eyes looked up at her with a hope that broke her heart. "Daddy's very busy with work, honey, but I'll record everything so he can watch it later." Max nodded, his little shoulders slumping slightly. "Okay." Diana fought back tears as she guided Max to the car, where their driver, Frank, was waiting. As they drove to the school, Max stared out the window, clutching his sheet music. "You know," Diana said brightly, "Grandma and Grandpa will be there. And Aunt Emma, too." Max just nodded. At the school auditorium, Diana greeted her parents and her sister Emma, who had flown in from Chicago just for the recital. "Let me guess," Emma whispered as they took their seats. "The great Nathaniel Carter is too busy making millions to watch his son sing? Please, not now," Diana murmured. Emma squeezed her hand. "Sorry." The recital began with the kindergarten class performing "You Are My Sunshine." Then it was time for the first graders. The music teacher announced, "And now Max Carter will perform Somewhere Over the Rainbow as a solo." Max stepped forward, looking tiny under the spotlight. He scanned the audience briefly, then began to sing. His sweet, clear voice filled the auditorium. Diana recorded every moment, tears streaming down her face. Back at Carter Enterprises, Nathaniel was in the middle of the dinner with Hiroshi Yamamoto and his team when his phone vibrated. It was a video from Diana, Max's performance. "Excuse me," Nathaniel said, rising from the table. "I need to take this." In the hallway, he watched his son sing. Max's voice was surprisingly strong for a 6-year-old. Near the end of the song, Max looked directly at the camera, and Nathaniel felt a stab of guilt so sharp it made him wince. When he returned to the table, Hiroshi looked concerned. "Everything all right, Carter-san?" "Yes, just a family matter." Nathaniel forced a smile. "Now about the integration timeline." The dinner concluded successfully. The Yamamoto team was impressed with Nathaniel's vision, and everything was set for the next day's announcement. It was nearly midnight when Nathaniel returned home. The house was quiet. He loosened his tie as he climbed the stairs, pausing at Max's bedroom door. Gently, he pushed it open. Max was asleep, clutching his favorite teddy bear. On his bedside table was a handmade card that read, "For Daddy," in crooked letters. Inside was a drawing of 2 stick figures, one big, one small, holding hands. Nathaniel's throat tightened. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed and brushed Max's hair from his forehead. Max stirred. "Daddy?" he mumbled sleepily. "Hey, buddy, I'm sorry I missed your show. It's okay. Did you see the video?" "I did. You were amazing." Max smiled slightly. "Tomorrow you can come to school for lunch. It's Parents' Day." Nathaniel hesitated. Tomorrow was the press conference. "I'll try, Max." "You always say that," Max said, his eyes already closing again. Nathaniel sat there for a long time after Max fell back asleep. When he finally went to the master bedroom, Diana was awake, reading a book. "How was the big dinner?" she asked without looking up. "It went well. The mergers ago," Diana nodded. "Congratulations." "Diana, about tonight." "Don't," she cut him off. "Just don't, Nathaniel. I'm tired of the apologies. This merger will set us up for life. Max will never want for anything." Diana finally looked at him, her eyes reflecting years of disappointment. "Except a father who shows up? That's not fair, isn't it? Do you know what Max said in the car tonight? He said, 'Maybe if he was a business, you'd make time for him.'" The words hit Nathaniel like a physical blow. He's 6, he doesn't understand. "No, but someday he will, and by then it might be too late." Diana turned off her lamp and rolled away from him. Nathaniel loosened his tie and walked to the window. The city lights spread out below him, the empire he'd built. But for the first time, he wondered what it had cost him. His phone buzzed with an email from James. "Final press release attached. See you at 8 a.m. to prep." Tomorrow would be the biggest day of his career. The merger would make headlines worldwide. Nothing could go wrong. Little did he know that in less than 12 hours, his 6-year-old son would bring his entire world to a standstill with just a few words. Morning arrived with a blinding brightness that matched Nathaniel's mood. Today was the day, his crowning achievement. He stood in front of his closet selecting his lucky navy blue suit. Diana was already up, making breakfast in the kitchen. The silence between them from last night still lingered. "Good morning, Nathaniel," said, pouring himself a cup of coffee. Diana nodded in acknowledgement. "There's fresh fruit in the fridge if you want some." "Thanks, but I'm having breakfast with James before the press conference." He checked his watch. "Is Max up yet?" "He's getting dressed. Remember, it's Parents' Day at school. Lunch is at noon." Nathaniel sighed. "Diana, you know I can't make it today. The press conference is at 10 and then there's the reception afterward. The Yamamoto team expects me to be there." Diana slammed a plate down on the counter. "Of course they do, and heaven forbid you disappoint them. That's not fair. This deal ensures our family's future, Max's future. Max doesn't need more money in his future, Nathaniel. He needs his father now." Before Nathaniel could respond, Max bounded into the kitchen wearing his school uniform and a bright smile. "Morning, Daddy. Are you coming to school today?" His eyes were hopeful, untouched by the tension in the room. Nathaniel knelt down to Max's level. "I've got a really big meeting today, buddy. The biggest one ever." Max's smile dimmed. "But it's Parents' Day. All the other dads are coming." "I know, and I'm really sorry, but this is the one day I absolutely can't miss work. How about we do something special this weekend, just you and me?" Max looked at the floor. "You said that last weekend, too." Diana shot Nathaniel a look that said, "See? I mean it this time," Nathaniel assured him. "We'll go to that dinosaur exhibit you've been talking about." Max just shrugged. "Okay." Diana grabbed Max's lunchbox from the counter. "Come on, honey. We need to get going or you'll be late for school." "Can I have a hug before I go?" Max asked. His father. Nathaniel hugged him tightly, feeling a strange reluctance to let go. "Have a great day, Max. I love you." "Love you too, Daddy." As Diana and Max headed for the door, Nathaniel called out, "Diana, I'll try to stop by the school if the reception ends early." Diana looked back at him with tired eyes. "Don't make promises you can't keep, Nathaniel. It only makes it worse." After they left, Nathaniel finished his coffee in the empty kitchen. The house felt too quiet. He pushed the feeling aside and grabbed his briefcase. Today wasn't about family drama. It was about making history. At Carter Enterprises, the atmosphere was electric. The lobby was filled with camera crews setting up for the press conference. Security was extra tight, with guards checking credentials at every entrance. Nathaniel strode through it all with confident steps, nodding to employees who looked at him with admiration. In the executive suite, his team was waiting. "There he is," James announced as Nathaniel walked in. "The man of the hour." Vivian handed him a revised speech. "I made the changes you requested, Mr. Carter." "Thank you, Vivian. Is the Yamamoto team here yet?" "Their car just arrived downstairs," she confirmed. James pulled Nathaniel aside. "Everything okay? You seem distracted." "I'm fine," Nathaniel assured him. "Just some tension at home. Diana's upset I'm missing Parents' Day at Max's school." James gave him a sympathetic look. "The joys of being a successful man, my friend. Our wives never quite understand what it takes, do they?" Something about the comment bothered Nathaniel, but he didn't have time to dwell on it. Let's focus on the task at hand. The next hour was a whirlwind of final preparations. Nathaniel reviewed the speech, greeted the Yamamoto team, and checked in with the PR department. Everything was perfect. At 9:55, Vivian knocked on his office door. "5 minutes, Mr. Carter." Nathaniel nodded and stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. As he prepared to leave, his phone buzzed with a text from Diana. "Max was really upset after you left. He made this for you to see before your big meeting." Attached was a photo of a crayon drawing. It showed a stick figure man standing at what looked like a podium and a smaller stick figure watching from far away. The words, "My dad is important," were written across the top in childish handwriting. Nathaniel stared at the image, a lump forming in his throat. For a moment, the enormity of what he was about to do, the merger, the press, the billions of dollars, felt strangely hollow. "Mr. Carter," Vivian called again, "they're ready for you." He slipped the phone into his pocket. "Coming." The press conference room was packed. Cameras flashed as Nathaniel took his place at the podium, flanked by Hiroshi Yamamoto and members of both executive teams. The Carter Enterprises logo shone brightly on the wall behind them. Nathaniel looked out at the sea of reporters. This was his moment, the culmination of years of work. "Good morning," he began, his voice strong and confident. "Today marks a historic moment in the business world. Carter Enterprises and Yamamoto Corporation are proud to announce a $4.2 billion merger that will revolutionize our industry." The cameras clicked frantically as he continued his speech, outlining the vision for the new combined company. Nathaniel was in his element, commanding the room with his presence. "This merger represents not just a joining of assets, but a fusion of ideals," he said, nearing the conclusion of his speech. "Together, we will build a future that—" A commotion at the back of the room interrupted him. Security guards were speaking in hushed but urgent tones with someone. Nathaniel tried to continue, but the disturbance was growing louder. Then a small, clear voice cut through the room. "Can someone tell my dad that family is more important than money?" The room fell silent. Cameras swiveled toward the source of the voice. There at the edge of the stage stood Max. His school uniform was slightly rumpled, his backpack clutched in one hand. His little face was flushed, his expression a mixture of determination and fear. Nathaniel's heart seemed to stop. Max, security, hesitated, clearly unsure how to handle the CEO's son interrupting the biggest press conference of the year. Max stepped forward, his lower lip trembling. "You promised, Daddy, you promised lots of times." The reporters were frozen, microphones still raised. The cameras were now all pointed at Max and Nathaniel. This unexpected drama was too good to miss. "How did you get here?" Nathaniel asked, his voice barely audible through the microphone. "I told Mrs. Peterson I had to go to the bathroom, but I took a taxi instead," Max explained. "I used the emergency $20 bill you gave me." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some journalists were already typing furiously on their phones. Hiroshi Yamamoto and the other executives exchanged uncomfortable glances. This was not part of the carefully orchestrated announcement. "Max, this is Daddy's work," Nathaniel said, trying to keep his voice steady. "It's very important." Max's voice trembled but grew stronger. "You always say work is important, but Mommy cries when you don't come home. And I just want my dad back." The words hit Nathaniel like a physical blow. The room seemed to fade away, until it was just him and his son, this small boy who had been brave enough to cross the city alone to deliver a message his father had been ignoring for too long. A tear slipped down Max's cheek. "Are you mad at me?" The question broke something inside Nathaniel. For the first time in his career, he had no prepared response, no perfectly crafted statement. He was just a father facing the consequences of his choices. Slowly, deliberately, Nathaniel stepped away from the podium. His hands, which had confidently signed billion-dollar deals, now shook slightly as he knelt in front of his son. "No, Max," he whispered, though the microphone still caught his words. "I'm not mad, you're right," Max sniffled. "Are you going to come home now?" Nathaniel looked back at the podium, at the executives waiting for him to continue, at the reporters capturing every moment of this unexpected drama. Then he looked at his son, really looked at him, and saw the pain and loneliness he'd been too busy to notice. In that moment, the decision was suddenly startlingly clear. Nathaniel stood and walked back to the podium. The room held its breath. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "I apologize, but I need to reschedule the remainder of this press conference." He turned to Hiroshi Yamamoto. "Hiroshi-san, I hope you'll understand. Today I need to be a father first." Before anyone could react, Nathaniel reached up, pulled off his microphone, and set it on the podium. Then he returned to Max, took his small hand in his and said, "Let's go to your school, buddy. We don't want to miss Parents' Day lunch." As they walked toward the exit, the press erupted into chaos behind them. Cameras followed their every step, and questions flew through the air. But for the first time in years, Nathaniel wasn't listening to the noise of his career. He was listening to the quiet footsteps of his son beside him. Diana was in the middle of a parent-teacher conference when her phone buzzed repeatedly. First a text from her sister, "Turn on the news now." Then notifications from news apps, breaking, Carter Enterprises CEO abandons historic merger announcement after son's emotional plea. Her heart racing, Diana excused herself and stepped into the hallway, quickly finding the news clip on her phone. There was Max, standing in front of all those cameras. There was Nathaniel, walking away from the biggest deal of his life, holding Max's hand. She was still watching, tears streaming down her face, when the school's front doors opened. In walked Nathaniel and Max, hand in hand, both smiling. Max ran to her. "Mommy, Daddy came to school with me." Diana looked at Nathaniel in disbelief. "What about the merger?" Nathaniel shook his head. "It can wait, some things can't." As they walked toward the cafeteria, where parents and children were gathering for lunch, Diana whispered, "The press is going crazy. Your phone must be exploding." Nathaniel patted his pocket. "I turned it off." "What about James? The board? The Yamamoto team? They'll understand. And if they don't?" Nathaniel looked down at Max, who was happily pulling them toward his classroom. "Then they don't understand what really matters." For the first time in years, Diana saw a glimpse of the man she had fallen in love with, the man whose ambition hadn't yet overshadowed his heart. "I can't believe you just walked away from the press conference," she said. Nathaniel squeezed her hand. "To be honest, neither can I. But when I saw him standing there, so small and yet so brave, I suddenly realized what I've been missing, what I've been throwing away." As they entered the classroom, Max proudly introduced his father to his teacher and friends. Nathaniel's presence caused quite a stir. Most parents knew exactly who he was. "Mr. Carter," Max's teacher, Mrs. Peterson, said nervously, "we're so honored to have you join us today, though I must say we were a bit concerned when Max disappeared from class earlier." "I'm sorry about that," Nathaniel said sincerely. "I think that's my fault. I've been teaching him the wrong lessons about what's important." As lunch began, Nathaniel sat at the tiny cafeteria table, surrounded by first graders, asking him if he really had a helicopter and if he knew any famous people. For once, he wasn't the intimidating CEO, he was just Max's dad. Diana watched them together, her heart full but cautious. One grand gesture didn't erase years of broken promises, but it was a start. Little did they know that this was just the beginning. The fallout from Nathaniel's dramatic exit would soon test his newfound priorities in ways none of them could imagine. The next morning, the Carter family's breakfast was interrupted by the incessant ringing of the doorbell. Frank, their driver, peered through the security monitor. "Mr. Carter, there are reporters all over the front steps," he reported. "At least a dozen news vans parked on the street, too." Nathaniel sighed as he cut a pancake into small pieces for Max. "I figured this would happen." "Daddy, are you in trouble?" Max asked, syrup dripping from his chin. "No, buddy. People are just very interested in what happened yesterday." Diana wiped Max's face with a napkin. "Your daddy did something unexpected, and when important people do unexpected things, it makes the news." Nathaniel's phone, which he had finally turned back on that morning, buzzed continuously. The screen showed dozens of missed calls and hundreds of messages from James, board members, investors, and reporters. "We'll use the garage exit," Nathaniel decided. "Frank, can you make sure the car is ready? I'll take Max to school myself today." After Frank left, Diana looked at Nathaniel with concern. "Have you talked to James yet?" Briefly. "He's not happy. The board has called an emergency meeting for this afternoon." Nathaniel's expression was grim. "Yamamoto is threatening to pull out of the deal entirely. What are you going to do?" Before Nathaniel could answer, Max piped up, "Daddy, can you come to my soccer practice after school today? Coach says parents can play too." Nathaniel and Diana exchanged glances. The board meeting would be at the same time. "I'll be there, Max," Nathaniel said firmly. "The board can wait." Diana raised her eyebrows but said nothing. As Max ran upstairs to get his backpack, she whispered, "Are you sure? This could affect your position as CEO." "I've missed enough of Max's life for that company," Nathaniel replied. "Yesterday changed something in me, Diana. I can't go back to how things were." Diana touched his hand. "I want to believe that, Nathaniel. But one day doesn't erase years of putting work first." "I know, but it's a start." He squeezed her hand. "I'm not asking you to trust me right away. Just give me the chance to prove this isn't temporary. Tightened after dropping Max at school and enduring the stares and whispers of other parents who had seen the news, Nathaniel headed to Carter Enterprises. The lobby was still buzzing with reporters, but security kept them at bay as he walked through the offices. Employees stared openly. Some looked shocked, others impressed, and a few seemed disapproving. Nathaniel greeted them all with a calm he didn't entirely feel. James was waiting in his office, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. "Finally," James exclaimed as Nathaniel entered. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" The stock dropped. 12 points this morning. 12. The Yamamoto team flew back to Tokyo last night and Hiroshi isn't returning my calls. Nathaniel sat down calmly. "Good morning to you too, James." "This isn't a joke, Nate. The board is furious. There's talk about whether you're still fit to lead this company." "Is that what you think?" Nathaniel asked quietly. James ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "What I think is that you had a moment of temporary insanity. A touching father-son moment, sure, but at what cost? This merger wasn't just about making us richer. It was about securing the future of 8,000 employees." "I'm not walking away from the merger," Nathaniel clarified. "I'm just changing my priorities." "You can't have it both ways," James argued. "This business demands total commitment, does it? Or is that just what we've convinced ourselves to justify neglecting everything else?" Nathaniel leaned forward. "I've given 20 years of my life to this company, James. I've missed birthdays, anniversaries, school events, all because I believed nothing was more important than success. And look what that dedication built," James gestured to the view of the city skyline. "From a small tech startup to this. At what cost, though? Yesterday, my 6-year-old son crossed the city alone because it was the only way he thought he could see me." Nathaniel's voice cracked slightly. "Do you know what that feels like?" James's expression softened. "Look, I understand you had an epiphany. That's great. But the timing couldn't be worse. The board meeting is at 3 p.m., and they're expecting you to have a plan to salvage the Yamamoto deal." Nathaniel stood up. "I'll be at Max's soccer practice at 3. Tell the board we can meet at 5. James stared at him in disbelief. "You can't be serious." "Deadly serious. And James, if the board has a problem with me putting my family first for once, they're welcome to find another CEO." At 3 p.m., Nathaniel sat on the bleachers at the elementary school field, watching Max's soccer team practice. The coach, a young man named Ryan, was showing the kids how to pass the ball. "Parents," Ryan called out. "Who wants to join in?" Nathaniel raised his hand, along with a few other mothers and fathers. As he jogged onto the field, Max's face lit up with pure joy, a look Nathaniel realized he hadn't seen in far too long. "Daddy, you're on my team," Max shouted, bouncing with excitement. For the next hour, Nathaniel Carter, the billionaire CEO whose decisions affected global markets, chased a soccer ball around a muddy field with 6-year-olds. His Italian shoes were ruined and his suit pants were stained with grass, but he couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed so much. Unbeknownst to him, someone on the sidelines took a photo of him giving Max a piggyback ride off the field. Within hours, it would go viral online with the caption, "The billionaire who chose family over fortune." After practice, as they walked to the car, Max slipped his small hand into Nathaniel's. "That was the best day ever, Daddy," he said simply. Nathaniel felt his throat tighten. "For me too, buddy. Can we do this every week?" "I'm going to try my hardest," Nathaniel promised, "and this time I really mean it." As they drove home, Nathaniel checked his phone. 23 missed calls, including several from board members. The board meeting had started without him. "Everything okay?" Max asked from the back seat. Nathaniel put the phone away. "Everything's perfect." Saturdays, when they arrived home, Diana was in the kitchen preparing dinner. Her expression was tense. "How was soccer?" she asked Max. "So awesome. Daddy played with us, and Coach Ryan said he's really good." Diana smiled. "That's wonderful. Why don't you go wash up for dinner?" Once Max was upstairs, she turned to Nathaniel. James called 3 times. The board meeting didn't go well. Nathaniel loosened his tie. "I figured as much." He said, "Alexander Thompson is pushing for a vote of no confidence." Alexander Thompson was the largest shareholder outside of Nathaniel himself and his most vocal critic on the board. Thompson has been looking for an excuse to push me out for years, Nathaniel said, pouring himself a glass of water. This just gave him the opportunity. Nathaniel, this is serious. You could lose everything you've built. Not everything. He looked toward the stairs where Max had disappeared. Not what matters most. Diana studied his face. You've really changed, haven't you? I think I'm just remembering who I used to be, before I convinced myself that success was measured in dollars and deals. Before Diana could respond, the doorbell rang again. Frank appeared in the doorway. Sir, it's Mr. Yamamoto. He says he needs to speak with you urgently. Nathaniel and Diana exchanged surprised looks. Hiroshi Yamamoto was the last person they expected to show up at their home. Send him in, Nathaniel said. Hiroshi entered looking grave in his immaculate suit. He bowed slightly. Carter-san, please forgive the intrusion into your home. Not at all, Hiroshi. This is my wife, Diana. After exchanging pleasantries, Hiroshi got straight to the point. I have seen the news. Your board is in chaos and our investors are concerned. I understand their worry, Nathaniel acknowledged, but I assure you my commitment to the merger hasn't changed. Perhaps, but everything else has, Hiroshi observed. I came here tonight to see for myself. See what? Hiroshi's expression was unreadable. If you are still the man I agreed to partner with, or if you have become someone else entirely. Before Nathaniel could respond, Max came bounding down the stairs. Daddy, I found my dinosaur book. Can we read it after dinner? He stopped short when he noticed the visitor. Oh, hello. Hiroshi's stern expression softened as he looked at Max. Hello, young man. Nathaniel made the introduction. Max, this is Mr. Yamamoto, an important business associate. Hiroshi, this is my son, Max. Max stepped forward and held out his hand very formally, just as he'd seen his father do. Pleased to meet you, Mr. Yamamoto. Hiroshi solemnly shook the small hand. The pleasure is mine. I believe we met briefly yesterday, though under unusual circumstances. Max looked down, suddenly shy. Am I in trouble for that? Hiroshi knelt to Max's level. Not at all. In fact, you reminded many adults of something important. Max brightened. Really? Yes. In Japan, we have a saying, the bamboo that bends is stronger than the oak that resists. Your father showed great strength by bending. Max didn't fully understand, but smiled anyway. Do you want to stay for dinner? Mom made lasagna and it's really good. Hiroshi looked surprised by the invitation. He glanced at Nathaniel and Diana. We'd be honored if you'd join us, Diana said, warmly. Then I accept, Hiroshi replied with a small bow. That evening, the Carter family and Hiroshi Yamamoto shared a meal that had nothing to do with business. They talked about Max's school, Hiroshi's grandchildren in Tokyo, and Diana's work as an art curator. Nathaniel found himself relaxing in a way he rarely did at formal business dinners. As they were finishing dessert, Max asked innocently, Mr. Yamamoto, are you mad at my dad for leaving the big meeting yesterday? A hush fell over the table. Diana looked mortified, but Hiroshi merely smiled. At first I was confused, he answered honestly. In business, such things are not done. But then I remembered when my own son was small, and I missed his graduation. Ceremony for an important meeting. What happened? Max asked. The meeting was successful, the business thrived, but my son has never forgotten my absence. Hiroshi's eyes met Nathaniel's. Some successes come at too high a price. After Max went to bed, the adults moved to Nathaniel's study. Carter-san, Hiroshi said, his tone serious again. Tomorrow morning your board will likely vote on your future as CEO. I know, Nathaniel acknowledged. Alexander Thompson has already approached me with an offer to proceed with the merger. Under his leadership, Diana tensed. And what did you say? Hiroshi sipped his tea thoughtfully. I told him I would consider it. He set down his cup. But after tonight, I have made my decision. Which is? Nathaniel asked. Yamamoto Corporation will only proceed with the merger if you remain as CEO. Nathaniel was stunned. May I ask why? Because I now see what kind of man you truly are, Hiroshi explained. A man who understands that true wealth cannot be measured in yen or dollars. He stood to leave. I have lived long enough to recognize wisdom when I see it. even when it comes in unexpected ways. After Hiroshi departed, Diana turned to Nathaniel. "What happens now?" Nathaniel pulled her close. "Now we fight, because I'm not giving up Carter Enterprises. I've put too much of myself into building it, but I'm not going back to being the absent father and husband either. Can you really have both? I have to try, for all of us." The following morning, Nathaniel arrived at Carter Enterprises earlier than usual. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. As he walked through the lobby, he noticed something different. Employees were approaching him, offering words of support. "My daughter saw you on the news," one software engineer told him. "She thinks you're a hero." "My wife and I were talking," said a marketing director. "Maybe we could implement more family-friendly policies here. Flexible hours, on-site childcare." By the time Nathaniel reached the executive floor, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about his family anymore. It was about creating a company culture that valued all families. James was waiting outside the boardroom, looking nervous. "Ready for this?" "More than ready," Nathaniel assured him. "Any last-minute intelligence?" "Thompson has 7 votes locked in. You need 8 to maintain confidence." Nathaniel nodded. "And Hiroshi? He's requested to address the board before the vote. Thompson's furious about it, but couldn't find a way to refuse." Inside the boardroom, the atmosphere was tense. Alexander Thompson sat at the far end of the table, his expression smug. The other board members avoided making eye contact with Nathaniel. As the meeting was called to order, Thompson wasted no time. "I move that we hold an immediate vote of no confidence in Nathaniel Carter as CEO." "Second," called one of Thompson's allies. Just then, the boardroom door opened, and Hiroshi Yamamoto entered with 2 of his executives. "Before you vote," Hiroshi announced, "there is something you should know." For the next 20 minutes, Hiroshi laid out his position. The Yamamoto merger would proceed only with Nathaniel at the helm. Furthermore, he had been so impressed by Nathaniel's commitment to work-life balance that he was proposing, making it a cornerstone of the combined company's philosophy. "In Japan, we have the concept of karoshi, death from overwork," Hiroshi explained. "Too many brilliant minds are lost this way. Carter-san's wisdom in recognizing the importance of family is exactly the kind of leadership our global corporation needs." Thompson looked stunned. "This is ridiculous. We can't restructure our entire corporate culture because Carter had a moment of sentimentality." Nathaniel stood. "It wasn't sentimentality, Alexander. It was clarity." He addressed the entire board. "For years, I've told myself that sacrificing my family time was necessary for this company's success. I was wrong." He passed out folders to each board member. "Inside, you'll find my proposal for a new approach, family-friendly policies that will attract top talent. Studies showing how companies with balanced work cultures outperform their competition long-term. A vision for Carter Yamamoto that values people as much as profits." The board members began flipping through the materials with interest. "This isn't just about my family," Nathaniel continued. "It's about all our employees and their families. It's about building a company that's successful, not just for the next quarter, but for the next generation." When the vote came, it wasn't even close. 14-3 in favor of keeping Nathaniel as CEO. As the board members filed out, James clapped Nathaniel on the shoulder. "I've never been happier to be wrong about something." Thompson paused at the door. "This isn't over, Carter. Sentiment doesn't drive stock prices." "Maybe it should," Nathaniel replied calmly. After everyone had gone, Nathaniel sat alone in the boardroom. He pulled out his phone and called Diana. "How did it go?" she asked anxiously. "I'm still CEO," he told her, "and I'm coming home early tonight." "Really?" "The board meeting went that well?" "The meeting went fine," Nathaniel said. "But I promised Max I'd help him build that dinosaur model tonight. And a promise is a promise." As he left the office that evening, at 5 p.m., for the first time in years, Nathaniel knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Balancing his responsibilities, as CEO with his commitment to his family, would be a daily challenge. But as he drove home, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: peace. The knowledge that he was finally living according to his true values. Little did he know that the biggest test of his new priorities was yet to come. 3 months had passed since the day Max had changed everything. Spring was turning into summer, and life at the Carter household had found a new rhythm. Nathaniel now left the office by 5:30 most days, attended Max's school events, and had even coached his soccer team to a triumphant 3rd place in the league. The merger with Yamamoto Corporation had been finalized last month, creating the largest tech conglomerate in the industry. Stock prices had initially fluctuated, but had stabilized higher than expected. Business magazines were calling it the compassionate merger, the first major corporate deal that placed employee well-being at its center. On this particular Sunday morning, the Carter family was enjoying breakfast on their terrace. Max was excitedly telling them about the science fair project he and Nathaniel had been working on all week. And then, the volcano goes boom. Max spread his arms wide. Mrs. Peterson says it might win first prize. Diana smiled, watching her husband and son together. The change in their relationship was remarkable. Equally remarkable was the change in her own relationship with Nathaniel. The tension that had built up over years of neglect was slowly dissolving, replaced by a tentative rediscovery of what had brought them together in the first place. "The presentation is on Friday," Nathaniel reminded Max. "We still need to paint the base. Can we do it after breakfast?" Max asked eagerly. "Absolutely." Diana's phone buzzed with a news alert. She frowned as she read it. "Everything okay?" Nathaniel asked. Diana hesitated. "Alexander Thompson gave an interview to Business Weekly. He's not exactly singing your praises." Nathaniel chuckled. "I'm shocked. He's saying the new family-friendly policies at Carter Yamamoto are decimating productivity, and that the company is headed for disaster under your leadership. Let me guess, he's shorting our stock." Diana nodded. "According to the article, he's betting heavily against you." Max looked up from his pancakes. "What does that mean?" Nathaniel explained simply. "It means Mr. Thompson is betting money that Daddy's company will fail." "But it won't, right?" Max asked with childlike confidence. "Not if I have anything to say about it," Nathaniel assured him. "Now, how about we get started on that volcano?" As Max ran inside to get their supplies, Diana gave Nathaniel a concerned look. "You're not worried?" "Thompson's been trying to undermine me for years," Nathaniel said, though his casual tone didn't entirely mask his concern. "This is just his latest attempt. The quarterly numbers come out next week," Diana reminded him. "What if he's right? What if the new policies are hurting the bottom line?" Nathaniel took her hand. "Then we'll adjust. But I won't go back to the way things were, Diana, not ever." She squeezed his hand. "I know, and I'm proud of you for that." On Monday morning brought unexpected news. Nathaniel's assistant, Vivian, met him at the elevator with an anxious expression. "Sir, there's been a data breach." Nathaniel stopped in his tracks. "How bad?" "Bad. Customer information, proprietary software code, internal communications, all compromised." She lowered her voice. "And there's something else. The breach appears to have come from inside the company." James was waiting in Nathaniel's office, his face grim. "We've got a serious problem, Nate." For the next hour, they went through the details of the breach. Millions of customers' data had been exposed. Early estimates suggested the cost to the company could be in the billions, not just in immediate damages, but in lost trust and future business. "We need to alert the authorities," Nathaniel decided, "and issue a public statement immediately." "There's more," James said reluctantly. "Some of the leaked communications are personally damaging to you." "What do you mean?" James slid a folder across the desk. Inside were printouts of emails from Nathaniel's account, dating back several years. Emails where he'd dismissed the importance of work-life balance, where he'd pushed employees to sacrifice family time for the company, where he'd openly mocked weak leaders who let personal issues interfere with business. "These make me look like a hypocrite," Nathaniel said quietly. "They make you look like someone who had a convenient change of heart when it benefited you personally," James corrected. The timing couldn't be worse, right before the quarterly report. Nathaniel's phone rang. It was Diana. "Have you seen the news?" she asked without preamble. "About the data breach, I'm dealing with it now." "No, about the interview. Alexander Thompson is on business today right now, calling for your resignation." Nathaniel switched on the office TV. There was Thompson, looking grave as he spoke to the camera. It's with great sadness that I reveal these communications. They show clearly that Nathaniel Carter's supposed commitment to family values is nothing but a PR stunt. The real Nathaniel Carter is the man who wrote that employees who can't prioritize work over family should find another company. How can someone like that lead our new family-friendly corporate culture? The interviewer nodded sympathetically. And what about the data breach itself? Do you think it's connected to Carter's leadership? Absolutely, Thompson replied without hesitation. This level of security failure points to a fundamental breakdown in leadership. The board needs to act before more damage is done. Nathaniel turned off the TV. He's behind this, he said to James. Thompson orchestrated the whole thing. Probably, James agreed, but proving it will be nearly impossible. And in the meantime, the damage is done. By noon, the company's stock had plummeted 18%. The board was calling for an emergency meeting. Social media was filled with angry customers threatening to take their business elsewhere. Nathaniel sat at his desk, feeling the ground shifting beneath him. Everything he'd built, both at work and at home, seemed suddenly fragile. His phone buzzed with a text from Max's school. Max upset after other children mentioned news about his father. Please call. Something hardened in Nathaniel. This wasn't just about his career anymore. Thompson's attack was affecting his family, the very thing he'd promised to protect. Get me everything we have on Thompson, he told James. Every deal, every investment, every skeleton in his closet. James looked concerned. Nate, what are you planning? I'm going to fight fire with fire, Nathaniel said grimly. If Thompson wants a war, I'll give him one. That's not who you are anymore, James reminded him. Remember? The words hit Nathaniel like cold water. James was right. Returning to his old cutthroat tactics would mean becoming the man he'd promised. To leave behind the man who put winning above everything, including his own integrity. You're right, Nathaniel admitted. But I can't just surrender either. His phone rang again. Hiroshi Yamamoto. Carter-san. Hiroshi's voice was calm, but serious. I have been informed of the situation. Hiroshi, I can explain. No need. We all have a past. It is our present actions that define us. There was a pause. The question is, how will you respond now? I don't know, Nathaniel admitted. Thompson has me cornered. There is an old Japanese proverb. The bamboo that bends is stronger than the oak that resists. You have already shown you understand this wisdom once. Perhaps it is time to bend again, but in a different way. After they hung up, Nathaniel sat in silence for a long moment. Then he picked up the phone again. Diana, I need to ask you something important. That evening, the Carter family home was unusually quiet. Max was subdued after his difficult day at school. Some kids said you did bad things, Daddy, he said as Nathaniel tucked him into bed. They said you're going to lose your job. Nathaniel sat on the edge of the bed. Max, do you remember how you felt brave enough to come find me that day at my big meeting? Max nodded. Well, tomorrow I need to be brave like you were. I need to tell the truth even though it's hard. Are you scared? Max asked. A little, Nathaniel admitted. But doing the right thing is more important than being scared, Max thought about this, then reached for something under his pillow. It was a small plastic dinosaur. Here, this is my brave dinosaur. He can help you. Nathaniel took the toy, his throat tight with emotion. Thank you, buddy. I think he'll help a lot. After Max fell asleep, Nathaniel joined Diana in the living room. Are you sure about this? She asked. It's the only way, he replied. Thompson wants to destroy me by exposing my past. The only defense is complete honesty. Diana took his hand. Whatever happens tomorrow, we'll face it together. The next morning, Carter Enterprises headquarters was swarming with media. News of the emergency board meeting had leaked, and reporters were speculating wildly about Nathaniel's imminent ousting. Inside the boardroom, tension was palpable. Alexander Thompson sat with barely concealed satisfaction as board members filed in. Hiroshi Yamamoto arrived with his team, his expression unreadable. When Nathaniel entered, Conversations hushed. He carried nothing but a small object in his hand, which he placed on the table in front of him, a child's plastic dinosaur. "Before we begin," Nathaniel said, "I'd like to address the board, and then I'd like to make a public statement." Thompson frowned. "This meeting is about the data breach and your leadership, Carter, not another PR opportunity." "Actually," Nathaniel replied calmly, "it's about the truth, the whole truth." For the next 20 minutes, Nathaniel spoke without notes or preparation. He acknowledged the authenticity of the leaked emails. He admitted to once being the kind of leader who valued profit above people. He took full responsibility for creating a culture where work came before family. "Those emails represent who I was," he concluded, "not who I am now or who I want to be." That day when my son walked into the press conference wasn't just a wake-up call, it was a complete transformation of my values. He picked up the dinosaur. "My son gave me this last night. He called it his brave dinosaur. He said it helps him when he's scared." Nathaniel looked around the room. "I'm not scared of losing my job or my reputation. I'm scared of losing sight of what really matters again," Thompson scoffed. "This emotional display doesn't address the data breach or the damage to the company." "You're right," Nathaniel agreed. "So let me address that now." He pressed a button and the room's screen lit up with documents. "These are records showing unusual access to our systems 3 days ago. Access using credentials that belong to a shell company, owned by—" Nathaniel paused for effect. "Meridian Holdings. Your holding company, Alexander?" The room erupted in murmurs. Thompson's face flushed dark red. "That's preposterous. You're trying to deflect blame. Our cybersecurity team has tracked the breach definitively," Nathaniel continued. "And while we're on the subject of transparency, perhaps we should discuss your short positions on Carter Yamamoto stock, or the meetings you've been having with our competitors." Thompson stood up, sputtering. "This is slander." "No," Nathaniel corrected him. "This is evidence, and it's all been turned over to the SEC and FBI as of this morning." Hiroshi Yamamoto cleared his throat. "If these allegations are true, Mr. Thompson, your actions constitute not only a breach of fiduciary duty, but potentially criminal behavior." Thompson looked around the room, finding no allies. "This isn't over, Carter," he hissed as he gathered his papers. "Actually," James said, standing up, "I think it is." He nodded to security personnel who had entered the room. "These gentlemen are here to escort you from the building, Alexander. The FBI has some questions for you downtown." After Thompson was gone, Nathaniel addressed the remaining board members. "I know I've given you reasons to doubt me, both the man I was before and the leader I'm trying to be now. So I'll understand if you want my resignation." Hiroshi was the first to speak. "Carter-san, in Japan we have a concept called Kaizen, continuous improvement. It applies not just to business processes, but to people as well. I believe we are seeing Kaizen in action with you." One by one, the board members expressed their support. The data breach would be addressed, the company would recover, and Nathaniel would continue as CEO with the full backing of the board. As the meeting adjourned, Nathaniel turned to James. "There's one more thing I need to do." An hour later, Nathaniel stood behind a podium in the company lobby, facing a wall of cameras and reporters. Diana stood to his left, her presence a silent support. The small dinosaur toy was visible on the podium. "3 months ago," Nathaniel began, "my son Max asked if someone could tell his dad that family is more important than money. Today, I want to answer him publicly. You were right, Max." He looked directly into the cameras. "For years, I was the kind of leader who expected employees to sacrifice their personal lives for this company. The emails released yesterday prove that. I'm not proud of who I was then, but I'm also not going to hide from it." Nathaniel took a deep breath. "To every employee who missed a child's birthday or a family dinner because of my expectations, I apologize. To every spouse who felt they came second to this company, I apologize. And to my own family who endured years of my absence, I apologize most of all." Diana reached over and squeezed his hand. "Carter Enterprises, now Carter Yamamoto, is changing. We're proving that success doesn't have to come at the expense of family. Our new policies aren't just PR stunts. They're a commitment to a different way of doing business." He held up the dinosaur. My son gave me this brave dinosaur to help me tell the truth today. The truth is, I'm still learning how to balance being a CEO and being a father. I won't always get it right, but I promise to keep trying, to keep improving, and to never forget that lesson again." As Nathaniel fielded questions from reporters, an unexpected figure entered the lobby, Hiroshi Yamamoto, accompanied by a small boy who appeared to be his grandson. When the press conference ended, Hiroshi approached with the child. "Carter-san, I would like you to meet my grandson, Hiro. He has come to visit from Tokyo." Nathaniel knelt to the boy's level. "It's very nice to meet you, Hiro." Hiroshi smiled. "I have missed too many moments with my own children and grandchildren. But it is never too late to change, yes?" "Never too late," Nathaniel agreed. As they walked out together, two powerful CEOs with their families, Nathaniel felt a profound sense of peace. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges at work and at home. Finding the right balance would be a daily effort, but something fundamental had shifted, not just in his priorities, but in his understanding of success itself. 6. Months later, the Carter family was on vacation. A real vacation, with Nathaniel's phone turned off and stored in the hotel safe. They were building sandcastles on a private beach, the tropical sun warm on their backs. "Daddy, look," Max called, pointing to a particularly impressive tower on his sandcastle. "It's as tall as your building." Nathaniel laughed. "Even better, because you built it." Diana, watching them from under an umbrella, smiled. Who would have thought? The great Nathaniel Carter, covered in sand and loving it. "Best decision I ever made," Nathaniel said, looking at his family with contentment. His company was thriving under the new leadership model. Employee satisfaction was at an all-time high, and productivity had actually increased, not decreased as Thompson had predicted. The data breach was a distant memory, with Thompson now facing federal charges. But most importantly, Max no longer had to cross the city alone to find his father. Nathaniel was right there beside him, building sandcastles and making memories that would last a lifetime. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the water, Max nestled between his parents on their beach blanket. "Daddy," he said, thoughtfully, "remember when I came to your big meeting that day?" "I'll never forget it," Nathaniel replied. "Were you mad at me?" Nathaniel pulled him close. "No, Max. I was grateful. You taught me the most important lesson of my life that day." "What lesson?" Nathaniel looked at Diana, then back at his son. "That sometimes it takes a child to remind a grown-up what really matters." As darkness fell and stars appeared above the ocean, the Carter family stayed together on the beach, talking and laughing. In his heart, Nathaniel knew that no business, success, no merger, no profit margin, no stock price, could ever compare to this simple moment of connection. The CEO had finally heard his son's plea, and in doing so, had found his way home. The end.